Last year I made a tree topper and it went pretty well, except the LEDs had burnt out by the end of the year, so time to make a new one. I'm going to use the same method as I did last year, which is clear filament PET G, printing 2 halves, and there are a bit of imperfections, so I have to go and either melt down the strings or scrape off some of the boogers and bumps that are on these stars. And actually one of them was warped pretty bad, but nothing that a bit of super glue and hot glue can't take care of. Here we got a box cutter and some sandpaper to kind of sand down the fronts of the stars, and then to get the lights in I just put a little bit of hot glue down on each tip, put the light in, let it sit for a few seconds, and then just kind of move my way up. So 1 LED on each tip, except for the top one it had 2, and in the middle there was about 3. I could maybe put more in, but you know, it's getting pretty cramped in there. And I actually had an excess of LEDs, and last time I just cut them off, but this year I kind of made a tail of sorts. So a little different this time. Getting it together was difficult because the super glue would not stick for very long, or I would have to use rubber bands to keep them together while I worked on the other parts of the star. So zip ties and rubber bands to keep it together. And you're still going to have gaps, so with those gaps you're going to use hot glue to fill those in. And end up doing a little bit more finishing work. I ended up using a Dremel on some of those crevices and ended up actually making a hole on one of the top of the tips, and again nothing that a bit of hot glue can't handle. Barely noticed it, especially from afar on top of a tree. And then on to putting that tack adhesive, spray adhesive on the star, and then putting glitter chimp glitter on there, some larger flakes, and then after that I would immediately go to clear coat with the tack still wet, wait for that to dry, and then another clear coat. And here is the end result. The LEDs are the WS2811s, and then I bought a controller on Amazon, just kind of a generic one, and it worked out pretty well. Last year I used WLED with an ESP32, but I was not sure if the shield broke the LEDs or if it was something else. So went with something a little different this time to see if they would last longer. So this is this year's and this is last year's star. This year on the left, last year on the right. And last year's looks wet because I used an 2-part epoxy to coat it. Put smaller glitter flakes, you really can't tell. This one, I like this year's better because the edges are retained with the spray clear coat rather than using the 2-part epoxy. And here's the end result. It's not your sad beige mom tree, it's, you know, your standard kid tree here, and you got the LED star on top. So I think it turned out pretty well, and I like it better than last year's. So if you're interested in trying this out, I'd say give it a go. It's about a 4-hour journey, at least.